The first time she said, "You're attacking me," we were discussing a $300 charge on our credit card statement. I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't used harsh words. I simply asked why there was a charge from a boutique I didn't recognize during a time when we'd agreed to cut back on spending. "Why are you attacking me?" The question hung in the air, catching me completely off guard. I remember staring at her, confused by the sudden shift. Instead of explaining the purchase, she'd flipped the conversation to make me seem like the aggressor. I apologized instinctively, backing down from a perfectly reasonable question. That was the first red flag I ignored. Over the next 2 years, "You're attacking me" became her standard defense mechanism. It didn't matter if I was asking about missed appointments, forgotten commitments, or excessive spending. The moment any conversation threatened to hold her accountable, those 3 words would emerge like a shield. In the beginning, it worked flawlessly. I'd immediately backpedal, apologize, and reassure her that wasn't my intention. I'd walk on eggshells, carefully rephrasing everything to seem less aggressive. Looking back, I was being trained like a dog, conditioned to avoid certain topics entirely. By our 3rd year of marriage, the pattern had become predictable. I once counted 5 "you're attacking me" accusations during a single 20-minute conversation about household responsibilities. Each time, the discussion would derail completely as I found myself defending my tone instead of addressing the actual issue. My friends noticed the change in me. "You seem tense all the time," my closest friend pointed out during a rare night out without her. "Everything okay at home?" I brushed it off with a laugh and changed the subject. But he was right. I had become a watered-down version of myself, constantly self-editing and second-guessing every word. The most frustrating part was watching her interact with others. With friends, family, even strangers, she was charming and receptive to feedback. The attacked persona only emerged with me, behind closed doors, when no one else could witness the manipulation. I started keeping a mental tally. 10 times in January, 8 in February. By March, I began documenting each instance in my phone's notes app. Date, time, topic of conversation, and her exact words. The evidence grew. Discussions about finances, family visits, household chores, vacation plans, all derailed by the same tactical phrase. The 27th time happened during what should have been a simple conversation about dinner plans. I'd suggested we try to cook more instead of ordering takeout. Her response came with the familiar wounded look. "Why are you always attacking me about how I manage our home life?" Something snapped inside me that evening. After 2 years of this pattern, after 27 documented instances of this manipulation tactic, I finally recognized it for what it was, a game. She was playing an emotional game where the rules were designed to ensure she never had to face consequences or take responsibility. And I had become a willing player, following her rules, accepting defeat time after time. But as I stood there in our kitchen, watching her familiar hurt expression form, I made a decision that would change everything. I was done playing by her rules. It was time to change the game entirely. That night, after the 27th "you're attacking me," I couldn't sleep. Lying beside her, listening to her peaceful breathing, I felt like a stranger in my own marriage. How had I allowed this manipulation to continue for so long? When had I become so afraid of confrontation that I'd sacrifice my own voice? The next morning, I decided to try a different approach. Over breakfast, I calmly said, "I'd like to discuss something important about our communication." I maintained eye contact, kept my voice level, and even practiced the conversation in my head beforehand. "I've noticed a pattern where you feel attacked when I bring up certain topics. I want us to work on healthier communication." I was being reasonable, mature, measured. Her response was immediate. "So now you're attacking how I communicate?" Her eyes narrowed. "Nothing I ever do is good enough for you." Despite my careful planning, we were right back in the same cycle. I retreated to the shower, turned the water as hot as I could stand, and tried to wash away the frustration building inside me. Later that week, I reached out to a therapist. I needed perspective from someone who could see the situation objectively. During our first session, I detailed the pattern, providing specific examples from my growing documentation. "What you're describing sounds like a form of emotional manipulation," the therapist explained. "This tactic diverts attention from the original issue and makes you defend yourself instead." For the first time, I had confirmation that I wasn't crazy. This wasn't normal communication between partners. This was calculated deflection. Armed with this knowledge, I suggested couples therapy. We have communication issues we need professional help with, I told her one evening. So you're saying I'm mentally unstable now? Her voice cracked with manufactured hurt. You're attacking my sanity because I don't agree with everything you say? 28. I continued individual therapy, learning about gaslighting and emotional manipulation tactics. My therapist suggested I try gray rocking, responding with minimal emotion to avoid feeding the drama cycle. I attempted this strategy during our next disagreement about her constantly being late when we had plans. It makes me feel disrespected when we agree on a time and you're consistently late, I stated plainly. You're attacking me over 5 minutes? She scoffed. Not everyone can be a perfect robot like you. 29. Each attempt to address any issue resulted in the same outcome. When I asked about her maxed-out credit card after promising to cut back, you're attacking my independence. When I mentioned that she'd forgotten my birthday, you're attacking me over something trivial when you know how stressed I've been. 30. 31. The psychological toll became physical. Tension headaches plagued me daily. My focus at work suffered. I lost weight. Friends commented that I seemed distant or checked out. I was constantly exhausted from walking the minefield of our conversations. What hurt most was watching her interact with others. With friends, she accepted criticism gracefully. With colleagues, she took feedback professionally. Only with me did she deploy the victim card. One evening, while she was out with friends, I found myself reviewing our wedding video. I barely recognized the confident, assertive man standing at the altar. Where had that version of me gone? The contrast between who I had been and who I had become struck me like a physical blow. That night, I made a decision. If this was indeed a game she was playing, it was time to understand the rules better than she did. I began researching manipulation tactics more deeply. I read books about emotional abuse patterns. I joined online forums where others shared similar experiences. And most importantly, I started formulating a strategy, not to win her game, but to stop playing it altogether. I wasn't going to respond to the same move a 30-second time. It was time to change her game to single-player mode. My new strategy began with documentation. No longer just counting instances, I started recording our conversations. Legal in my state with single-party consent, these recordings became my reality check when self-doubt crept in. The evidence was undeniable. In one recording, I asked if she'd called the plumber about our leaking faucet as she'd promised. Her voice escalated immediately. God, you're attacking me the moment I walk through the door. I've had a horrible day. The recording captured my calm response. The reasonable tone she'd later claim was aggressive. Another time, I recorded her telling our mutual friends that I was constantly criticizing her. When they were gone, I played back what had actually happened earlier that day. I'd simply asked if she'd remembered to pay the electric bill after we'd received a late notice. These recordings confirmed what I already knew but struggled to accept. I was being systematically manipulated. The person I'd vowed to spend my life with was deliberately using emotional warfare to avoid responsibility. I began adjusting my behavior based on this clarity. When she deployed her tactic, I started responding differently. The first test came when she spent $500 on concert tickets without discussing it. We should talk about large purchases before making them, I said calmly. You're attacking me over wanting to have fun for once. Her eyes widened with practiced hurt. 33. Instead of apologizing or backpedaling, I simply stated, I'm not attacking you. I'm addressing a specific action that affects our shared finances. Her expression flashed confusion before hardening. You always make me feel like I'm doing everything wrong. She launched into a tearful monologue about how controlling I was. I remained silent, letting her performance play out while recording the entire exchange. When she finally paused, expecting my usual capitulation, I simply said, when you're ready to discuss our financial boundaries without claiming victimhood, let me know. Then I left the room. The shock on her face was palpable. The script had changed, and she didn't know her new lines. Over the next week, I employed this strategy consistently. When she claimed I was attacking her for asking why she'd told her mother she could stay with us without consulting me first, I calmly stated, this isn't an attack. It's a conversation about mutual respect and decision-making. 34. Her tactics escalated as her go-to phrase lost power. She began calling me emotionally abusive for withdrawing instead of apologizing. She told mutual friends I had changed and become cold. She left tear-streaked notes about how she felt unloved and misunderstood. The old me would have crumbled under this pressure. The new me recognized it as a more sophisticated version of the same game. The turning point came after dinner with her parents. During the meal, she portrayed herself as overworked and underappreciated, casting subtle looks at me. Her parents offered sympathetic glances in my direction. On the drive home, she launched into me. "You just sat there like a statue. You made me look like I was complaining for no reason. You were crafting a specific narrative," I replied evenly. "One that doesn't reflect reality. You're attacking me in front of my family now." Her voice rose with theatrical indignation. "Even in the car, you can't stop criticizing me?" 35. This time, I pulled the car over and took out my phone. "Let's listen to something." I played a recording from the previous week, where she had explicitly stated she would make sure my parents see how little you appreciate everything I do. Her face drained of color as her own voice filled the car. "You've been recording me?" she whispered, genuine emotion replacing the manufactured kind for the first time in months. "I've been protecting myself," I corrected. "This game you're playing, claiming I'm attacking you whenever you're held accountable. It stops now." The drive home continued in silence. That night, she slept in the guest room. But something fundamental had shifted in our power dynamic, and we both knew it. The game was changing, whether she was ready or not. The morning after revealing my recordings, I found her at the kitchen table surrounded by papers. Her eyes were red, evidence of a sleepless night. "We need to talk," she said, voice hoarse. "This isn't who we are." I sat across from her, maintaining the emotional distance I'd been cultivating. "Who are we, then?" I asked. She launched into a well-rehearsed speech about how relationships go through phases, how communication breaks down, how we both had contributed to our problems. It was articulate, reasonable, and completely devoid of accountability. "I've made a comprehensive list," I interrupted, placing my phone on the table. 27 times before I started recording. 8 more since then. 35 instances where you've accused me of attacking you when I asked legitimate questions or expressed reasonable concerns. Her rehearsed composure faltered. "You've been keeping count? Like some sort of scorecard?" "Evidence," I corrected. "And yes, I needed it to maintain my sanity." Gaslighting only works when the target doubts their own perception. Gaslighting. Her voice rose. "Now you're accusing me of psychological abuse. Because I get emotional during arguments." I played another recording. It captured her calm, collected tone with the delivery person at our door, followed immediately by her switching to tears and accusations of attacking her when I asked about the package contents moments later. "This isn't getting emotional during arguments," I said. "This is manipulation. And it stops now, or I stop this marriage." The ultimatum hung in the air between us. For the first time since we'd met, I saw genuine fear in her eyes. Not the performed fear she used to control conversations, but real fear that she was losing control of the narrative, and possibly me. "I don't know what you want from me," she whispered, a last attempt to make me do the emotional work. "Complete honesty," I replied, "starting with why you feel the need to deflect accountability by claiming victimhood." What followed was our first authentic conversation in years. She admitted the tactic began unconsciously, a defensive response to criticism in her childhood. But she acknowledged it had evolved into a deliberate strategy in our marriage, one that worked so effectively she kept expanding its use. "It was easier than admitting fault," she confessed. "And you always backed down." "Not anymore," I stated firmly. "I've shown you evidence of a pattern. Now I'm setting boundaries. The next time you claim I'm attacking you instead of addressing the actual issue, I'll walk away from the conversation entirely." "That's not fair," she protested. "You can't just walk away." "Actually, I can. And I will." My tone left no room for negotiation. "I'm not required to participate in emotional manipulation." She tried several tactics over the next 2 hours. She cried. She reminded me of good times. She even attempted to seduce me. When none worked, she briefly resorted to anger, accusing me of being cruel and calculating for recording her. I remained unmoved. Those recordings protected my perception of reality when you tried to distort it. They're a symptom of our problem, not the cause. Finally, exhausted, she asked, "What happens now?" "That's largely up to you," I replied. "I've set clear boundaries. I've provided evidence of the problem. I've stated consequences for continued manipulation. The next move is yours. We agreed to a trial separation, living in the same house, but operating independently. Separate bedrooms, separate schedules, minimal interaction unless absolutely necessary. She suggested couples therapy, and I agreed under one condition. I'll share all 35 recordings with the therapist beforehand, I stated, so they understand exactly what we're addressing. Her reluctant agreement told me everything I needed to know about her commitment to actual change. As we ended our conversation, she made one final attempt. Don't you think you're being a little harsh? After everything we've been through. I recognized the subtle invitation to her game, but I wasn't playing anymore. No, I said simply and left the room. The game had officially changed to single-player mode. The first week of our single-player mode arrangement revealed how deeply entrenched her manipulation tactics had become in our daily life. Without my emotional reactions to feed off, she seemed genuinely lost. I maintained strict boundaries. When she left dirty dishes in the sink for days, previously a trigger for arguments where I'd eventually be accused of attacking her housekeeping, I simply washed my own dishes and left hers untouched. When she asked why I hadn't cleaned up our mess, I replied calmly, "Those are your dishes. I've handled mine. So you're just going to be petty now?" Her tone sharpened, fishing for conflict. I shrugged. "I'm respecting your autonomy over your choices and their consequences." Her frustrated expression made it clear. The game wasn't fun without a second player. Our first therapy session came 2 weeks into this new arrangement. True to my word, I'd sent the therapist recordings documenting her pattern of claiming victimhood when faced with accountability. The therapist addressed it directly. "I've reviewed the materials provided, and I'd like to discuss the phrase 'you're attacking me' that appears frequently in your communication." My wife shifted uncomfortably. "Those recordings don't show the full context. His tone and body language can be very intimidating." I remained silent, allowing the therapist to moderate. "In several recordings, you transition from speaking calmly with others to immediately accusing your husband of attacking you when he asks standard questions about shared responsibilities," the therapist noted. "Can you help me understand that pattern?" For the first time, her deflection tactics met professional scrutiny. When she attempted to reframe herself as the victim, the therapist gently but firmly redirected the conversation back to the evidence. By session's end, she was visibly shaken. In the car, she unleashed her anger. "You've turned the therapist against me. You edited those recordings, didn't you?" Every recording was unedited and date-stamped. I replied evenly. "And your response right now is exactly the pattern we're addressing." She fell silent, strategy temporarily derailed. Meanwhile, I focused on rebuilding myself. I reconnected with friends I'd drifted away from, rejoined my weekend basketball league, and started seeing a personal trainer. The physical and mental improvements were rapid and noticeable. Her attempts to derail this progress were predictable. She accidentally scheduled activities during my basketball games. She complained about the expense of my gym membership while buying new clothes. She left passive-aggressive notes about how I was changing and becoming selfish. I recognized each tactic for what it was, attempts to regain control, and each time, I refused to engage. "Your basketball friends are more important than our marriage," she demanded one Saturday morning. "This isn't about importance rankings," I replied. "It's about maintaining healthy individual activities alongside our relationship. You're choosing them over working on us." Her voice cracked with familiar manufactured emotion. "I've committed to weekly therapy, daily communication exercises, and reading the books our therapist recommended. I'm working on us. I'm also maintaining my individual well-being. Both can exist simultaneously." As weeks passed, her strategies evolved. She tried love bombing, excessive affection and attention designed to disarm my boundaries. When that failed, she attempted to enlist friends and family as allies, sharing carefully edited versions of our situation that cast her as the abandoned wife. I addressed this directly with those closest to us. "We're working through significant communication issues. I appreciate your concern, but the full situation is complex and private." The most desperate attempt came when she feigned a health scare, claiming concerning test results that later, when I insisted on seeing documentation, mysteriously must have been mixed up with another patient. Through it all, I maintained single-player mode. I was polite but distant, helpful but not enabling, present but not emotionally invested in her manipulative cycles. By our 6th therapy session, The dynamic had shifted dramatically. Our therapist noted the change. There's been significant progress in how you're communicating. However, I'm concerned that only one of you is doing the intensive work this relationship requires. On the drive home, she broke down. Why won't you just go back to how you were before? Why are you being so cold? The question revealed everything. She didn't want healing. She wanted the return of a manipulable partner. I'm not being cold, I explained. I'm being clear. There's a difference. That night, as I prepared for bed in what had once been our shared bedroom, I realized an important truth. I'd already emotionally left the marriage. The only question remaining was whether I would physically leave as well. The decision to officially end our marriage came not as an emotional outburst, but as a calm, rational conclusion. After 2 months of therapy, boundary setting, and separate living under the same roof, it was clear that fundamental change wasn't happening. I scheduled a private session with our therapist to discuss my decision. I've given this relationship every possible opportunity to heal, I explained. But I can't be the only one doing the work. You've made extraordinary efforts, the therapist acknowledged. And you're right that relationships require mutual commitment to change. With professional validation of what I already knew, I prepared to have the final conversation. I chose a neutral time, after dinner on a weeknight, when neither of us had immediate obligations. I'd like to talk about our future, I began, sitting across from her at the dining table. Something in my tone must have signaled the gravity of the moment. She set down her phone immediately, giving me her full attention. I've made a decision about our marriage, I continued. I'm filing for divorce. The words hung in the air between us. She stared, waiting for more, for justifications, explanations, or signs of doubt she could exploit. I offered none. Just like that, after everything we've tried. Her voice trembled, but I recognized the calculated tremor, having heard it deployed strategically dozens of times before. We haven't both tried, I corrected gently. I've tried. You've performed trying. That's not fair. Her volume rose. I've gone to every therapy session. I've done everything they ask. You've attended sessions, I agreed. But you've continued the same manipulation tactics outside the therapist's office. You've made promises about changing your communication style, then immediately reverted when convenient. She switched tactics, her eyes softening as she reached for my hand. We can work through this. Marriages have survived worse. I withdrew my hand. This isn't about survival. It's about whether this relationship supports our mutual growth and happiness. For me, it no longer does. So you're just giving up? The accusation came with a flash of anger. After all these years? I'm not giving up. I'm choosing my well-being after exhausting all reasonable efforts to preserve the relationship. Her final card came predictably. So this whole time, you've been attacking our marriage? Planning your escape while pretending to work on things. I almost smiled at the irony. Even now, facing the consequences of her actions, she was attempting to deploy the very tactic that had led us here. No, I replied calmly. I've been honest about my boundaries and needs. I've communicated clearly about what wasn't working. I've given multiple opportunities for genuine change. This isn't an attack, it's a consequence. The conversation continued for another hour. She cycled through her entire repertoire. Tears, accusations, guilt, seduction, anger, and finally, bargaining. I remained steady, neither cruel nor wavering. When she realized I wouldn't be manipulated, her mask dropped entirely. You'll regret this, she said coldly. No one will ever understand you like I do. That's the point, I replied simply. Your understanding of me was as a target for manipulation, not as a partner. I had already consulted with an attorney and prepared my exit plan. Within a week, I had moved into a furnished apartment across town. The divorce proceedings were straightforward, as we had no children and relatively uncomplicated assets. She made the separation process as difficult as possible, of course. She told mutual friends I had abandoned her without warning. She forgot to forward my mail. She delayed signing necessary documents. Each obstacle was met with the same calm, unbothered response from me. Exactly what she couldn't stand. 6 months later, our divorce was finalized. I sat alone in my new apartment that evening, reflecting on the journey. I reviewed my notes documenting those 35 instances of "you're attacking me," remembering how each had made me doubt my own reality and perception. The most valuable lesson I learned wasn't about her manipulation. It was about my response to it. I had allowed someone to make me question my own reasonable expectations in a relationship. I had accepted blame for simply asking for accountability. Never again. Today, a year since our divorce, I've rebuilt my life completely. I'm in a leadership position at work, having regained the confidence that had been systematically undermined at home. I've developed stronger friendships based on mutual respect and honest communication. I've even started dating again, with a clear understanding of red flags I once ignored. Sometimes people ask if I miss being married. Truth is, I don't miss the marriage I had. What I mourn is the marriage I thought I had during those early years before I recognized the manipulation. But that was never real. What's real is this. I changed her game to single-player mode, and in doing so, I won back myself.